Hello and welcome back to the How to Get an Analytics Job podcast. So today we've got a long-time listener. So Jon Thompson, you said you've been listening for what, an hour a day for how many months now?
It's actually been about 2 hours a day now since September. Before that, it was when I could. But yeah.
That is phenomenal. And what's interesting is that I essentially want to interview you because we're piloting a new program that's essentially like a work study, and you leveraged an internship as an adult.
Yes.
Because I think most people think of internship, they think of college and undergrads.
Right.
But you actually were working as a teacher, got an internship, and now has successfully accepted an offer as an analyst.
Correct. Yes.
Awesome.
And so with that, it's, I've kind of always been brought up in the sense that if you want something, get it. It doesn't matter. Age doesn't matter where you're at socially or economically. If you want something, get it, go for it. Why not? So, and that's kind of what led me to just jumping on the internship. And I know that I'm a little bit non-conventional, but I figured, what could it hurt?
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about this internship. So is it like designed for college kids and you just like happen to be the best applicant?
Well, this is unique in the internship. Okay. Is so to kind of bring you full circle is I've been a huge follower and supporter of like anti-trafficking and human trafficking. So I've spent a couple of years in the past with OUR, the Operation Underground Railroad, just trying to be a volunteer through them. And they're a fantastic entity, but I really wanted to kind of get my hands dirty a little bit more, really get in there better. So I started looking around and I found out that Atii is the Anti-Human Trafficking Intelligence Initiative. They were looking for interns. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to apply. And I started out as an investigator. They just pushed me some information, see what you can find on this stuff. And I really, it's all volunteer based. And I just kind of dug in with it. And I started really kind of producing some good, information, intel, so they can give it to their ops teams. And then it was one day, I was kind of looking at analytics as a career, and I thought, I wonder if I can do something with this company, with this entity, with my intern. And so I reached out to the powers that be, and I said, look, I'm going to school for analytics. I kind of want an analytics career. Is there anything I can do with this? And they said, how good are you at cleaning data? And any analyst knows cleaning data is like the best thing ever, right? So I said, primarily I was using Excel just in my personal life for things and kind of playing around with it. So I said, I can use Excel. I can clean, hundreds, thousands, whatever. And they said, what about millions? Well, that's a lot, but sure, let's try it. I love challenges. I love to really push the envelope. So I thought, all right, let's see what you have. So one thing kind of led to another, and they kind of started giving me a little bit of things here and there. And I ended up getting the title of a geospatial analyst. So I was getting like cell phone pings.
The reason I'm smiling is because this is literally the first project we've lined up, and it's early stages yet. We just met with the head data scientist at a sex trafficking nonprofit.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. And it's so funny because also that plus we're bringing on Kinga Hill, who she's got a PhD and she does like heavy duty geospatial mapping. So
that stuff's so cool.
It's what's interesting is the first student, Rachel hasn't been on the podcast yet, but so she has a background in criminal justice, and already like her first dashboard that we're helping her create is the cold cases here in North Carolina.
Nice.
So it's like, okay, I wish Rachel were here to like ask you questions.
That would be cool. Yeah.
Like all the different, what tools are you using? Are you using like coding languages, or is it?
Well, right now it's how it works. And I'm in the very early stage of the geospatial analyst platform with what I'm doing. So I'm kind of interning as that with them, along with some investigative stuff. So I'm kind of transitioning, but primarily I'm just using Excel for what I have. because it's a volunteer program and it's kind of, you do it at your leisure, it's whatever you have available. So as I kind of dig into my analytics career and, more stuff I put on my computer, I do have SQL, I do have Tableau and Power BI. So there's some opportunity there that I can actually transform into that and to really work on that. But I think lately I've just been primarily using Excel because that's really what I'm comfortable with. So in Excel can populate the millions of lines that I need it to, and it can show me the patterns that I'm seeing, and I can pass that off. And so far it's been super fun. Geospatial is really cool. I really like that avenue. And it's kind of nice with the internship because the uniqueness of ATII is basically they have so much work available that whatever you want to do, you just say, hey, this is what I want to try. And they'll put you wherever you want to try things out. So I can really get a feel of all the different analytical backgrounds and really kind of hone my skills towards various ones and really have fun doing it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because we've been running this apprenticeship program for just under a year right now. And the downside of leveraging my consulting practice is that all of my students have had to sign an NDA. Okay. To where now that we're exploring early stages, just kind of prototyping out a new program of these nonprofits want the impact of their work out there. So you can literally have a portfolio piece of the work that you've done.
Yes.
And then what's interesting is literally I was talking to Rachel an hour ago about we can put the fact that you work for this company, you can put data scientist, you could put internship, apprentice, volunteer, whatever. But then if you actually have work that's substantial that you've done, I think that's really going to turn heads. And it sounds like, is that essentially, how did that port over to the interview setting? Was that your main talking point when you went into
that? Was a huge point of it. So yes, that was, I think that was a really powerful statement, powerful piece with that is they not only could see that there's a history that I started out as an investigator and then I was promoted to geospatial analyst, and they could also see the amount of time I was volunteering with this entity. So it showed, that I was solid. I was willing to learn more and kind of take it on. And the other thing that I did with the interview is timing wise, it was really kind of neat because like I said, I'm going to a university right now for data analytics. And one of the assignments we just had in our course was we were supposed to go to Yahoo Financial and then just pick a company and analyze their financial status, look at their history, look at the last 10 years, and just try to forecast what how it's going to go. And that's part of our project we're doing in school. And so I knew we had an interview coming up with this Fortune 500 company. And it was, I've been applying since February of 2022, and this is really the only legitimate interview I ever had. So I thought I have to do really well with this. So for the assignment, I picked that company. So I was able to do an analysis, a financial analysis of the company, showing the last 10 years, showing the progression and forecasting. And I actually used that as a portfolio in my Maven Analytics. And then when I talked about it during my interview, one of the board, the interviewing team, pulled up my portfolio on Maven Live and shared that project with the whole group. And they were just astonished that, wow, you actually, went outside the box, you looked at our company, you forecasted on your own. And I think when I kind of worked with the recruiter, and when I talked to them, they thought that was that's unheard of. Nobody really thinks to do that. So, and I think that really was a selling point that showed, that I'm interested in the company and, you can really take it on yourself. And so, I don't know for sure, but it seemed like it really did help, that and the fact that I was an interning.
Yeah. Well, this is something that I feel like I'm a broken record at this point of people, especially trying to break into the space for entry-level roles. They get hyper fixated on tools.
Oh yeah.
So they're going to take 15 to 20 of these LinkedIn learning courses, Udemy, and they just rack up all these badges, and they want to jump into a job, job ready. But none of that really works. It's interesting. It's just, there's just so much noise out there.
Yeah.
And it's a very cheap signal to where what you've done is you've shown that, hey, I'm very interested in this in a very genuine way. And you've actually gone out into the world and you've got the right analytical mindset. And it doesn't matter that, you're just in Excel right now, because they can extrapolate, oh, well, if we, put him in this training program, put him on this tool, he can stick it out and really, really learn this.
Right.
So I'm kind of curious, what are you going to be using mainly Excel in your first analytics job?
Yeah. In my first job, what they explained to me is it's basically all Excel, and they also use Power BI. And I'm kind of a Tableau guy. I've going on LinkedIn and just kind of which route to go. Most people are saying you got to go Tableau. So I really started learning that, thinking that was more well-rounded. And then I get this interview and they're like, well, we use Power BI. And I thought, I was honest. I'm like, I've never even put foot in there, but I have no problem learning it. And that's the big thing I've told is just don't oversell yourself in these interviews. Talk to what you know and leave it at that.
Well, you don't want to lie. You don't want to lie, because then, missing 2 questions, if you're getting, I don't know, quizzed on SQL, not great. But if you're lying, that is a major, risk to the organization. Because what if you do get the job and then you're lying about, what the data says, or, you're doing unethical things that can really come back to bite the company. So,
and I think for me, a lot of things, and I think a lot of people who are open to work, who have been open to work, and who are trying desperately to get to land a role, I think we all kind of get to that point where we're like, well, I did Python for 5 minutes, so I'm going to put Python on there that I know how to do it. And even myself, I found myself kind of leading that, like, well, I could do this, and I thought at the end of the day, what if I'm offered that job? Am I going to be able to put my money where my mouth is? And if I can't, then you got to be careful with that.
Well, one of the very first people that I helped get a job in the analytics space, she got a job that was like, it was that situation where she really didn't know the coding language. You can learn it, but she was a really close friend of mine. Molly, if you guys are following this, she had a very hard 6 months of, being on that job, because especially like she was working in a remote setting. So it wasn't like you could just go over to someone's desk and say, hey, I'm stuck on this. So that's a toss up, because what you could say is that I'm working on Python and put it on there. But if it says you need, 1 to 2 years of experience with Python, it's probably not the right position for you to apply for. Right.
And that gets tough, because if you're in that point where, who knows what your personal life is, if you're trying to pay your bills, and if you have kids or whatever the case is, you almost get that desperation where you're like, I got to get something. So you got to do what you got to do. So there's that fine line you kind of have to be careful of. And I think at one time or another, we've all kind of thought about that, but I'm thankful that reality kind of set it. It's like, look, this is where we're at. And that's kind of what, Excel is my thing. That's my jam. And visualizations, I've always used Excel. I just started getting into Tableau. I haven't looked into Power BI, and I was just transparent with it. Like, look, this is where I'm at. And, I've always read about hard skills versus soft skills. Like, you can have great hard skills, but you lack this, and vice versa. And I think for me personally, I just tend to have a lot of energy. I got a lot of excitement about what I do. I love what I do. I might not have the hard skills, but I'm coachable. I'm eager to learn. I'm driven. So those sorts of things seem to kind of help you along, I think.
Right. And I see that with a lot of the students I've worked with, where they're learning these more advanced, they're getting into coding, when it's like, you got in the door of the analytics space with Excel, and you didn't go into all the crazy different, some of these people are spending like 50 to 100 hours developing Python or R. And I think that that's a complete flip on what you should do. You should do the minimal viable, like, prototype of like, hey, I can come in and I can analyze data, then get paid to develop that skill set.
Right.
So it's almost like you're doing all this free labor, to develop this in this kind of setting that's, I don't know. I feel like a lot of people are like slightly deluded about what it's like out in the real world. Because a lot of these, a lot of these courses have pristine data sets,
Yes.
and
They're not
the outcomes are very clear, and there's a
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4-step process to where, I mean, and let's loop this back to your internship. What problems were you solving? Were you interfacing with someone, like, was there a team lead that you were meeting with, or like, how was that run? I'm very, very curious about that.
Yeah. So with us, every Friday we have an intern check-in, and it's just runs
Okay.
for an hour. Just how are things going? Where are you at with things? But for the rest of that week, it's kind of on us. There's email communication. If I need more intel, I can request it. They'll get it to me. But essentially, I'm on my own. But yeah, when you're dealing with geospatial stuff, there's millions of lines, and you're not going to have lines that are completely filled out all the way across. You're missing data left and right, and there's big gaps, and you're trying to fill the gaps and figure out why is there a gap. And so there's a lot of these head scratching kind of moments there. So you have to do, you try to clean what you can. And then there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of, hey, I'm missing this. And then they kind of go up the chain and back down the chain. So there's a lot involved with trying to really pinpoint what we're trying to achieve. But at the end of the day, the big projects we work on is trying to figure out whether it's an IP address ping or a cell phone hit, trying to figure that out with trafficking and finding out the routes that they're taking. How are they getting in the country, out of the country, et cetera. And you need all that data to really try to narrow it down to show you that image of, where those hits are coming from and how they're doing what they're doing. So it's definitely a challenge. It takes a lot of time. And it's not something that I have found that you can do quickly. And if you get easily frustrated, it's not the right gig for you.
Well, yeah, I think that's essentially how it works in the real world. I think, well, I don't know. I guess it depends on, there's such a variance across, like, for example, I had to teach myself pretty much everything. And I mean, I kind of went the insane path of, I would close a consulting engagement and then figure out how to do it after I had already closed it. I probably knew maybe
backwards.
60 to 80%, to where Katie, who's come on, and she's an analytics manager. She worked at Lincoln Financial, and she said, being with those bigger organizations, it's a lot more laid out. So you would go in and get that mentorship, to where I didn't really have any mentorship, and I'm starting to see the value of that. And that's where I think, lining out these projects, kind of giving like it's almost like an independent study, which we're still so like early phase with this. But what I'm curious about is, what happened when you got stuck on something? Did you just have to figure it out on your own, or was there like a mentorship aspect to this?
That's a great question. No, it's there was major support with this organization. It's just phenomenal support, and it's really great because if my go-to doesn't have an answer for me, he goes to his go-to, and it's a very quick return. Just on a personal level, I always waited. I mean, unless it was time sensitive, I personally wanted to really dig and get frustrated. And because I've always learned, I mean, I'm kind of an old soul where the best teacher is frustration and trying to figure it out on your own and not knowing what to do. But yeah, if there was something that was time sensitive, absolutely. If I get stuck on something, I just can't, something's not right, I reach out. And then we also have senior analysts through there and people that have been doing it a long time. So I don't just have one mentor, but I have a whole team. So, and every one of us interns has a whole team to support them. So it's absolutely phenomenal. I love it very much.
That's such an interesting concept. And that's kind of, we're definitely having some parallel thinking in that. What I'm thinking of setting up where, Kingo would come on and maybe have like a once a week touch, like kind of like that internship touch base meeting, where they could go in and ask her questions about, whatever specifics. But then also too, they're interfacing with the various different nonprofits. And what's wild to me is that we've approached 5 in the last 2 to 3 weeks, and nobody's approached them with this idea yet, which I'm really, as an entrepreneur, it's like, it's good to have a new idea, but there might be a reason. Like, that's what I'm still a little worried about. It's like, there might be a reason that nobody is doing this right now. Although I don't know. I think that there's just this breakdown in higher education on how they're teaching analytics. Because it's almost like, I see analytics as you could teach it in a classroom setting, but that feels very cold and removed versus
Yeah.
I like the apprenticeship model where it's like you go out and you solve a real problem and you get that tutelage and that. I was just talking to a friend about how, we developed a strategy this year to go and like really try to push, our awareness on LinkedIn, and that strategy failed miserably. And the thing is, like, during my MBA, I read about, various different huge companies going and developing a strategy and then pivoting. And it's such a different experience reading it on a page in a book and living through that. Because it's like you have a budget and it's like we went on a 3-month sprint, and it's like that budget, the money is being drained and the pressure is on. And like you were saying, leveraging that frustration of like, oh, I've hit a dead end. It's great that you had the social network though of being able to reach out to people, and that's actually something you could bring into an interview. This is how, because I don't know if you got asked this question, but it's a really common one. Tell me about a time that you got stuck on a problem. How did you resolve it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
there
collaborative
problem solving. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's very cool. Interesting.
Yeah, but like you were just mentioning, I just wanted to say to like, college and these more conventional ways of teaching analytics. I've done them all. I early on trying to navigate this myself, not knowing the things that I know now. I started out with, like I said, I'm still going to college for my bachelor's. I did the Coursera Google Analytics, which I think I was there for maybe 3 weeks of it. And I'm just like, this is too much all at the same time, trying to learn a little bit of everything. I did Udemy's SQL certification. My brother-in-law works for Salesforce, so he kind of got me started in the IT world with the DevOps. So I was doing the Trailhead with trying to get the administration. So essentially I've got courses all over the map everywhere right now that are sitting unfinished because it's just, you don't know what direction to go in. And just like I think in the last month or so, I found Maven Analytics, which is honestly like my go-to. I absolutely love it. I love the platform. I love the teaching. I love the portfolio aspect. That's kind of, where everything is right now. And I've kind of just shut away everything else. So
yeah, they do a really good job. We've actually partnered with them. And yeah, what I learned, back 3-4 years ago is that it's a full-time job creating courses on Power BI and Tableau, because as soon as I created my Udemy course on Power BI, I think it was like 16 days later, they updated, and like, I don't know, a quarter of the lectures were now out of date. And it's like, I spent, 100 hours on this course. So yeah, they built a whole like cottage industry around keeping that up to date. But also too, it's interesting how you can pretty much learn analytics for free. Like you can just go to YouTube and just start searching.
Well, yeah.
And then you can filter it by recent, because something that was posted 10 years ago, I mean, they might not even have the same buttons. They might have completely different capabilities on the various different tools.
And I think, like you said, YouTube, I think that's kind of one of those that is almost, I don't want to say forgotten, but people don't think about YouTube so much as they're like, what's the latest and greatest? We got to go online. We got to go to Udemy and Coursera and all these platforms where YouTube's been there all along. And like, my favorite is Alex the Analyst. Like I'm on there all the time with Alex Freeberg and how simple he lays things out. Like all the courses, and they're all free, and you can rewatch them and take notes. I mean, it's a wealth of knowledge. And I think just taking advantage of those free courses, and that's kind of the best way to do it.
Gotcha. Okay. So what's your story? So you pivoted, you were working as a teacher and then pivoted into, I'm seeing Junior Compliance Analyst on your LinkedIn right now.
So that's my most recent newest role. And that's the breaking into IT. That's my first data analyst role I've ever had. And so, yes, I've been teaching for 4 years, just transitioned to that role. So I start here shortly. And I think, I looked at, I don't know if anyone else does this, but I looked at myself as why me? What was it about me that landed this gig? Because, I don't have a whole history of IT. I don't have the, endless list of hard skills, but I look at everything I've done in the past, and, they look at my background, which as of late, I'm a teacher for 4 years. Prior to that, I worked for the Department of Corrections. So that's kind of
interesting.
Right.
So actually, one of my very first apprentices, he was working as a corrections officer up in Virginia.
Okay.
And he ended up landing an analytics job at Liberty University. What I think it is, honestly, I don't think people have a cohesive narrative about how to sell themselves in an interview.
Yeah.
Especially in the analytics space. I think you get a bunch of like geeks, people that just like want to geek out on specific things.
Yeah.
To where it's like they don't spend very much time reflecting on who am I, where have I been and where am I going, and then turning that into something cohesive. To where the value that I see with the apprenticeship is that you were able to completely rebrand yourself.
Yes.
As I am an analyst, and it's not in like a cheesy way. It's not a cheap signal. It's not like, oh, I'm certified in Tableau now because I took the $100 certification. It's not like that certification doesn't mean that you're an expert in Tableau. It means that you know enough about it to like pass the test. Which I mean, that is a signal into itself, but I think it's the stories that you have, like the stories that you've already kind of like brought onto this podcast about, how you're looking, like you were talking about like IP addresses and like there's this whole, and I think too, what's interesting is like you're genuinely curious about this too, right?
Yes, I am. I am a nerd in that sense. Yes, like I don't, like you talked about geeking out. Like I geek out differently. Like I like the curiosity, the things that maybe haven't been thought of, or that's kind of where a lot of my analytical desires was from corrections, is reading the reports and hearing things and asking, did you follow this up? And no, we never did. I don't care. Well, why not? I always want to ask that next question. And that's where I started just kind of collecting my own data outside the job and populating it and going on Excel at home and trying to figure out how can we reduce, inmate attacks? How can we increase, inmate successes? I did a study when I was there where I started calling, we had an all male population facility, and I would just refer to everyone as sir. And my fellow officer would refer them by their last name. So I started marking, like how many people would I see each day calling them sir. And what I realized over a year is more and more people would come talk to me, and less would talk to them, simply because of that word sir, of the showing more respect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was such a kind of a dorky thing, but it was enough to show me like, I really like analytics. I really like taking data and seeing what we can do with it. And I even had a little chart and everything that I went and showed the warden, saying, look, if you address these people with respect, you're going to get better morale. You're going to get less, attacks. And, I was there for about 3 years, and then I changed into teaching, but that's kind of where it all started for me, is that curiosity, like you said. And what, like every job I've done, like what can I analyze with this? How can I bring analytics into this job on my own personal level and really kind of teach myself as I go? So I think everything I've done brought me up to this new role.
Okay, so we touched on this a little bit before we hit record. So you've applied for 8,400 jobs at this point?
8,700.
Wow.
Yes.
It's funny because you what our students in the last cohort discovered Civium. So Civium, for those of you who are listening, is it's a way for you to automate applications.
Yes. Yeah. You put in the criteria and the keywords, what you're looking for, and you can connect it to Career Builder and LinkedIn and Indeed and all these other platforms. And anytime a job is posted, the algorithm will scan that job. And if your keywords match any of those jobs, it applies for you just like that.
Right. You got to be careful though, because I think we had somebody do some research. I think it violates LinkedIn's terms of service. So you're rolling the dice there, especially like if you're somebody who's like built a following, really built out a brand.
Yeah.
That's one thing that Ian Clausewitz is really hesitant about is hooking up any type of third party to LinkedIn.
Yep. And I had found that out myself. Yeah, I did this. This was probably 6 months ago or so. I had read one of my connections had posted, and I thought, well, I'm going to give it a shot. It was a 14-day free trial. I thought, I'll give it a shot. Nothing really panned out with it. So I'm a little thankful that I have to deal with any of that kind of stuff. But as anybody knows who applies, every time you submit an application, you get an email that says, thank you for applying. And then a couple of days later, you get another email that says, thanks, but no thanks. So you're talking, for my case, 8,700 jobs. That's 8,700 thank you emails, 8,700 no thanks. My email was, I don't know that I would do it again because it was so overwhelming.
Yeah, it's funny because when our students first found out, I was like, this is too good to be true. Like it's anything where it's just like you push a button and then you get like outsized results. It's like there's something amiss here, or there's some missing piece.
It's a nice concept, but I think in reality, it's it causes more trouble than it's worth. I think, just on my personal opinion, I would rather look for the right job, and that's kind of how I landed this, was doing it on my own terms.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. So what was your process of landing the interview? Did you, I guess, which tactics bore fruit in terms of like you actually landing interviews? What worked for you?
Yeah. So what I did is I got a little bit of advice here and there. A lot of it, I leaned to my brother-in-law. Like I said, he's been in IT now for 6 years, highly successful. He's kind of my go-to. And he said a couple things. He says, when you go to apply for jobs, it always says, how many applicants there are. He goes, if you have more than 200 applicants, he goes, no offense, but with where your skill set is, you're probably not going to be noticed. He goes, I would shoot for something that has, 100 or less or something like that. So that was kind of where I started.
Okay, wait, let's pause there, because I did see a post of, did you see that post
I think
that went viral?
Yeah, where it says that not necessarily applied. They just viewed the job.
That means, so there's like, there's some, and that's, this is like that might change. But yeah, there was some hiring manager who said, I looked at, we made a post for an analyst job. Within a day, we got 200, it said 200 applicants, but we only had like 16. So like, don't necessarily let that discourage you. But one hack actually would be to sort by new. So you can apply within the last 24 hours or something like that.
Yes. And then your numbers are lower. So yes, exactly. So that was one thing I thought of. And also for me personally, just from where I'm at geographically, it had to be a remote job. Even hybrid, I would be looking at driving an hour and a half. So I didn't want to do that. I was trying to improve my situation. So I was looking for remote. I was looking for entry level. So that was kind of where I started. And then I would look for me, being in the education field, to be quite honest and blunt, it didn't matter how much I was going to be getting paid. It had to be more than I was making as a teacher. So a remote job, quality of life, that kind of stuff. So then I would just apply. I tried to stay away from the easy applies, just because naturally that's going to be a quick thing for me. So it's a quick thing for everybody. So I wanted to take the time to go to the website, to really look at the job, to go through that long process, because not many people would want to do that. So I figured that would give me a little bit of an edge. How I ended up getting this role was a little unique, because I will admit, up until I started dealing with recruiters, I was like anti-recruiter. I'm like, I don't want to talk to a recruiter. I don't know why I had that preconceived notion, but so I applied for a business analyst job. And it was a mid-senior level, and I thought, probably not going to get it, but I'm going to put my name out there. And a recruiter reached out and changed my whole opinion. Super, super nice, like just high energy, great guy. He said, look, I looked at your resume. It's fantastic, but you don't have all the skills for this. He goes, but I'd like to hang on to your resume and see if there's a better job that fits. And I said, go ahead. That's whatever. And I kind of forgot about it. Well, about 2 weeks later, he called me up on the phone and says, hey, I have a job for you. He goes, this is a perfect fit. I want you to apply for it. So I said, okay. So I applied for it, and that ended up being the job that I got. So recruiters are awesome. I love recruiters, because you never know where they're going to take you. And I always keep an open mind. So it seemed to work out really well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you got to think about like the game that's being played. Their full-time job is to find qualified candidates to place roles. So that could be a long-term play for you, in terms of not only can this person get you that first job, but maybe 3 to 5 years down the line, they'll get you the next job. And it actually sweetens the deal for them, because you're going to have a higher salary, which is going to be a bigger commission for them, most likely.
And see,
I think that
that was
most
just
recruiters
even
work on
uneducated.
yeah. There are I did have a student who got scammed by someone who was posing as a recruiter, but yeah. Well, and there's also to kind of talk about or unpack the recruiters. One of my undergraduate students actually, so she's in my analytics minor, but she's also an accounting major. So we actually took Ian's social media formula, but she posted about the CPA exam. Turns out that one of the recruiters for Ernst & Young, one of the big four consulting firms, was following that hashtag, saw her post, reached out to her. She got an interview and then got an offer. But what's crazy is that she had already secured an offer for $5,000 higher than what they were giving her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that is a wild story, but yeah, so it seems like I imagine that the CPA, like, because CPA is kind of outside of my, my area of expertise. I imagine that there are probably not as many accountants posting as. Seems like there's a lot of traffic around analytics and data science, probably cybersecurity, to where I don't know. It seems like a lot of noise on LinkedIn right now, to where
I noticed that as well. Yeah. So I'm more lately. I haven't been posting as much. I just kind of read over some stuff, and because if I don't have anything of solid substance, I don't want to just create more chaos and noise and stuff. But there's still a lot of good stuff that's posted. But yeah.
Gotcha. Very cool. So, how did you go about finding this internship? Was that you were just following them, and then saw that
I was following. Yes. So at the time I was involved with OUR, and and that was kind of like the number one. I was really involved with them, and like I said, I just wanted to be more involved because I didn't feel like I was really playing a part, so to speak. So I was following a bunch of anti-trafficking entities, and I started looking into ATII, and I noticed that it says this accepting interns. Do you want to do investigations? And I thought, oh, this is great. With my corrections background and with my law enforcement stuff, that's exciting for me. So I put my resume out there. I applied, and I got the email back saying, welcome aboard. We'd love to have you. And that's just kind of how it happened. And it's a really tight knit, very, it's made up of former military, former law enforcement. So there's a lot of really great, intelligent people that are involved with that. And there's no ceiling. You can work as much as you want or as little as you want. And it's fantastic. It's probably one of the best internships that I've ever been a part of.
Well, I'm thinking about the value of it in terms of the network that you're building.
Oh, yes.
Because think about
my network's massive.
Yeah. Well, okay. What do you mean when you say that? I'm curious what you mean.
What I mean is I'm more of a quality over quantity. I don't have 5 million followers, but the ones I do have are in very, very important roles, very high-end roles that are
right.
Like you said, the networking is, and it doesn't matter if it's the CEO of the entity. I've talked to him directly, and very down to earth. I'm not intimidated by anybody. They don't kind of hold themselves that way. They're very humble, very down to earth. And I guess that's the biggest thing I look for in an entity is who can I relate to? Who can I, reach out to if I need questions or support or anything like that. And they nail it every time.
Well, but think about what you're doing is you're networking with such intention, because it's like you have things that are in common and you're working on a goal with people who are like-minded.
Yes.
That is how networking should go. I think that it's okay to reach out to people and connect on LinkedIn, but that's a very, very weak connection. Oh, I saw your post and now I'm following you. I feel like so many people get distracted by that, and they see, these huge engagement numbers, but that doesn't mean as much as, for example, the analysts that you got to work with in this space, you're helping them do their job better, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So then that's
then
huge.
They know who I am. I know who they are. And I learned so much from them. And it's not about, the platforms that you're using. It's the how-to, it's the why, it's the, what questions are you answering through this? And that is the information. And that's the education that is priceless. It's fantastic.
Well, I think that because I've been working through this lately of, I don't know, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I had this like weird anxiety where I couldn't look. What happened was I started building my following more on LinkedIn, and it started to really degrade my mental health to where I was just constantly just having like these dopamine hits. And then somebody, maybe 1 out of 10 comments would be negative because I don't know what that was. And then I had just like this aha moment of like, all of this is just like an illusion. Like none of this really, really matters. And because it's like, I'll get offended and then, or, somebody will get canceled or something bad will happen. But then it's like, that's forgotten in 3 days. It's like very, very transient and not permanent.
Oh yeah.
To where what you're doing, that relationship you're building, that might be where your next job comes from.
And that's, I mean, prior to getting this offer, which I'm so thankful for. Like this is like this is better than I could have imagined. But that's one thing I looked into. I said, where are we at with a possible long-term investment here? And with that entity, at the time, it's all about the money, it's about the finance and that kind of stuff. But and that's where I put myself is I look at like, okay, so I'm 41. I have a family. I'm not fresh out of college. I'm not just kind of a risk taker and jump all over the place. Like I'm very intentional with what I do. And so if I'm going to invest my time in anything, I want to know that there's opportunity to grow, an opportunity to possibly see how far I can get with that. So, and that's an absolute. I mean, I keep my doors open all the time because you never know what's going to come.
I like that you just use the word investment, because I think that that's kind of the root of what's going on is that you are investing your time and your energy and you're creating something versus a lot of the people who spend all their time on LinkedIn and all the people who take all the courses, they're consuming. They're basically consuming something that's already been like, it's almost like one of those meals that you just pop in the microwave and then you consume while you watch it over TV or something like that. Yeah. Versus like you're almost like going and you're making like a meal from scratch, from base ingredients. Like it's and it's interesting because I don't know. I feel like almost like a little dense of like not realizing this sooner of like I would see people who have like these huge followings and be like really impressed by them, but a lot of it's just noise. Like it's not very value additive in a lot of ways.
And I think I was a contributor to that even a year ago because I didn't know how to navigate LinkedIn. I didn't know how to navigate a professional element. And I think it took me just kind of hitting a hard pause and saying, okay, where am I going to spend my time? And my wife she reminds me all the time that my plate's too full. She says, you got to get rid of something. You have too many things to do. I hear that all the time, but for me, I am invested in this stuff. I don't want to keep using the word, but that's what it is I have taken this initiative to contribute and to be a part of something to say, hey, I'm branding myself with this entity. So I don't want to just flake out. I don't want to just do kind of a half-ass job and turn in what I have. What's the point of doing it then? Like I believe in this cause, I can get behind this cause and I'm going to push forward with it, and that's the same thing with my new role. I researched the company. I absolutely love the company, supported 100%. So it's so much easier to really get on board with that and push forward with it and really want to invest my career and my future with that company. So it's not just a job.
That's so cool. So what advice do you have for those who are who are in your position? Like if you were to go back and do it all differently, like are there any hacks?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I'm actually, I just started writing a book on transitioning into data and just putting it all in that. So this is great. So my hack would be don't worry about college. Like I said, I talked about my brother-in-law, never went to college.
Hey, I'm a college professor here. How dare you, sir?
I mean,
no, I
go to college. No, but I mean, college is great for a lot of people in a lot of situations. I think if you want to be a successful data analyst, I think your best course of action is to do the Udemy or the Maven Analytics or the YouTube. Just find something that is next to free or inexpensive because that's where you're going to get the most value.
Right, because I'm looking at your LinkedIn right now, and it looks like so you got a degree back in 2013, and then you went back 10 years later to go and get a second degree.
in 2013, I wanted to be a lawyer, so I went to law school. And I realized while I was going to school and working in a law office that what I wanted to do wasn't what I was able to do. So
Mhm.
I wanted to help people. I wanted to change their lives. And it became too hard with the red tape and the statutes and stuff. So I said, I'm not doing this. So then I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I just went back to the workforce. And then I decided, you know what? I started out when I went back to school at Bethel, I was going for special education because I was going to continue the education route, but my heart wasn't in it. And my wife and I had a very long talk. It came heated a
Mhm.
little bit, and because she's a teacher of 20 years, God bless her heart, it's not for me, And I told her, I said,
Mhm.
my heart's not in it, And she goes, well, what do you want to do? And analytics. What are you talking about? She goes, that's so boring. I said, to a lot of people, it is that don't understand it. And
Right.
my son, he's 18, and he goes, did you get the job, Dad? And I said, I did. He goes, so what are you doing? I said, I want to be an analyst. He goes, that's so boring. Like for an 18-year-old, I'm sure it is. But for
Right.
me,
Yeah.
that's what gets me going. I spent my whole life drawing and art, and I love the visualization. I love the computing the data, and that's just kind of where it's at for me. So I did halfway through my bachelor's, I pivoted and dropped the education and went for data analytics. So while I'm going to school for that, I'm also doing Udemy at the same time.
Right. See, what I think is so fascinating is that we've had between our career services program and the apprenticeship, we've had probably around 1,000 applications. And between a quarter and a third of those who apply have a master's in data science, applied mathematics, analytics, or something related to that.
Mm-hmm.
So people are going and spending 30, 40, sometimes 60,000, $100,000 on these degrees, and
Yeah.
then they're not coming out like with anything. And
Yeah.
I think that there are certain schools, like if you get like one of the top 10 schools, go for it. If that's, you got to be sure that that's what you want to do though, because
Right.
that you're on the hook for, 6 figures. But
Well,
that
and
being
that's
said,
that.
you
Yeah.
buy into that network and then, you're a Harvard man or a Stanford man or, whatever, to where you can break into this space so much cheaper than that. Like it's, I
Right.
don't know. I
And
feel,
I
I
didn't know
feel
any of that.
bad for these people. Yeah.
Well, when you start out, and if this is a new field for some of them, it's like you don't know what you don't know. And it took me. I mean,
Mhm.
like I said, I started pursuing data January of 22, and I mean, it took me until just this last summer to realize you don't need the college. These are better courses. This is how you do it. So, I was almost a year behind. But I think the biggest
Right.
thing is the people on LinkedIn that kind of do help saying, this is how you want to do it, and this is the path you need to take. That does help a lot of people.
Well, another way to think of college is it's like a 5 to 6 figure networking event. Like you got to really consider the network that you're buying into. Now, I will say this.
Right.
One piece of advice is if you already have an analytics job, getting your company to pay for your master's degree, I think is a smart move because you can mitigate your risk. One of our
Yes.
friends, he got an MBA with concentration in analytics down at Pembroke, and
Okay.
his company paid for everything but $1,000 of that. So I
Oh,
do
wow.
think that master's degrees are valuable, but going to get a master's degree to pivot a career is a very high stakes gamble, in my
It,
opinion.
yeah, I don't know that I would do that personally. So I think I mean, if I wasn't so vested in bachelor's, I would probably stop. But because I'm less than a year away, I'm just going to push through and get it. So to get it, but in
Yeah.
retrospect, I don't know that I would really need it.
Yeah. Well, I think part of the reason, and correct me if I'm wrong, is getting a degree in something, I think helps you see yourself differently. Was that your motivator to like kind of
I think
have an
so. I
identity
think that's what it would.
shift?
Yeah, because I sat here with an associate's degree, and my wife has a bachelor's, going for her master's, and I'm like, I kind of want my bachelor's. So there's that almost prestige feeling behind it, where I kind of want
Yeah,
that status.
I gotcha. That's interesting because I you could have potentially gone for a master's degree in that space, but I don't know that's a
Yeah,
really interesting because yeah, I see that a lot where people will study like history and then go get a master's in data science or computer science or
hmm
analytics, and that feels a little bit disjointed to where
right.
the in my MBA cohort, we was split pretty much 50-50. Like half of the people had worked for like 3 to 5 years or something like that. And the other half went directly from undergrad to graduate. And it was a night and day difference to where, like, if you're using a master's degree to accelerate momentum you already have, I think it does help quite a bit.
That'd be a different story. Yeah,
Right.
Absolutely.
To where, it's, I don't know. I feel like morally outraged at this, like just how the state that's going on here. But yeah, so you got any other bits of advice? So, okay, number one, you don't need to go back and get a degree in analytics to break into the space. So that's
just my opinion
right there. $20,000-$30,000 worth of value.
Yeah. The other thing, and like we kind of touched on this a little bit, is just pay attention to when you're applying for scams, because it seems like there's more and more out there. I was almost roped into one, and I realized when it was through a platform, I can't remember what it was. It was something like Skype, where everything was text. There was no phone calls, no video. It was just words. And they, send me your bank account and all this stuff. And I thought, that's kind of what stopped it for me. But
bank account, wow, yeah,
because for direct deposit, of course they're going to hire you. They're going to get your direct deposit, and
here's something wild.
What's that?
My Verizon account was hacked yesterday, or I found out that it was hacked yesterday. Someone somehow hacked my code and bought $3,000 worth of phones. Like these frauds and the cybersecurity stuff is no joke. I went and got it sorted out. Like their fraud department was on top of it, but yeah, somebody showed up to a Verizon store impersonating me, and then you gotta feel honored, right? What?
You gotta feel honored, huh?
I guess. I mean, I didn't realize this, but apparently, like, my Verizon account had a $7,000 credit limit that I guess I didn't even realize was there. So yeah,
I didn't know that.
But yeah, you got to be wary of scams. I feel bad because I had one student who went through, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 rounds of interviews or something, and like really got their hopes up, and then it just, we need your social security number and your bank account and your mother's maiden name.
And I went through 2 rounds, and it was the point where I got an offer letter. It had the company name on it. I mean, everything was legit. It was letterhead, and I actually sent it to my brother-in-law. I said, hey, just look over this, because my wife looked over it. I looked over it. Everything was legit. And the one thing my brother-in-law said, he goes, have you Googled the address? I never thought to. So on the address on the thing, I Googled the address, and it showed up as an abandoned warehouse somewhere out in the middle of It was like my first. And had he not said that, I mean, they're getting very, very good. And it's scary because there's people that, like myself, who were just desperate trying to get into the data field, trying to get a job, trying to make a legitimate living. And there's people taking advantage of people like that. And it's very frustrating.
Well, that's what's so despicable about it, is that, if you're in a comfortable spot and you're really, like, content, you're way less vulnerable. So it's like they're really like preying on the most vulnerable people.
Right.
And then, like, they're going from, I'm in a bad spot, to now I'm in even a worse spot. So
right. And I found it's not like just one platform. I found that the scams that I had came from LinkedIn and Indeed and Career Builder and Monster. So they're covering all different things, and usually, like, if I found it was a scam, I'll reach out to the company, and more often than not, then they'll put a disclaimer on their webpage, like, we are not hiring. And so I would say that almost deterred me. I almost stopped my search, and I almost said, this isn't for me, and I'm going to figure something else out. I mean, I was right at that point of, like, now what do I do? Do I really continue on this? And I'm very thankful I did. But at the time, I was really on the fence.
Gotcha. Well, that's so cool. So you've listened to the podcast for 2 hours, what, 5 days a week
every
day?
Yeah.
6 months now?
Since September. Yeah. About that. Yeah.
That's wild. So, I mean, I'm like really flattered that people are listening that much. Like, it must just be listenable, I guess. Like, what's keeping you coming back?
Well, for me, it's 2 things. It's what can I learn that I haven't learned already? And then there's also, when you listen to that many of them, there's a lot of common themes that keep coming back. Some of the people say the same things, and that just solidifies like, okay, this is really what it's like. And a lot of it was, when you're not in the analytics field and you want to get into it, it really gives me a peace of mind of this is what I can expect. And I think that's a huge part of why I listen, is the reality of it. Is I don't feel like I'm starting a new role blindly. Like I kind of know what to expect because awesome. I've heard it from so many people. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's kind of the vision that I have for this is it's essentially a college level guest lecture every Friday. Mm-hmm. So, and especially now it's interesting because like, I don't know if you've gone all the way back to the first iteration of this. It was me and Elizabeth Illig, and she was doing career services at High Point. It felt a lot more corporate and like buttoned up.
Yes, I've noticed that. Yeah, you've definitely changed as things have gone on, a lot more relaxed, a lot more casual. And I think that's, for me personally, that's kind of made me want to listen more, is because it didn't seem so structured. It was a little more like having a conversation. So it's a little easier to listen to, yeah.
It's good because I'm worried. I'm like, what if these tangents are so boring to people and they're just like,
oh no,
get back to the good stuff.
I think you got to be kind of the right nerdiness of it to get into it, because like I said, I have an hour commute, and sometimes I don't even realize I've been driving an hour because I'm just absorbing everything that's coming in. So I think it's absolutely helped me. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Oh, I mean, long form content is, it's just such a different beast compared to social media. To social media, it's like where there's like, for example, YouTube, like this podcast, we get way richer of engagement on the podcasting platforms versus on YouTube. There's 6 different videos that you can click off of at any time, and they're just competing versus, I think it's probably the medium of like being able to listen to this while you work out, while you cook, while you're driving. So that's fantastic. And
it's awesome.
It's just so happened that this week we didn't have a guest lined up. So it's like, I saw your message on LinkedIn, and I was like, bam, that's perfect. Let's put this. Well, because also too, I mean, it's super relevant for kind of the next phase of kind of, I don't even know what to call this right now. It's like, I think in the intro for the podcast, I'm calling it an ecosystem, where it's like you have the consulting clients, and the students, and then you have the experts coming on. And I don't know, it's interesting seeing how all of these kind of like nodes are working in tandem.
Yeah, it is pretty cool.
Awesome.
How it kind of all develops. So and you bet, man. Thank you.
So do you want, where's the best way for people to kind of follow you on this journey? Did you say LinkedIn?
So for me right now, I would say LinkedIn. Yep. That right now, until I figure out what I'm doing with, maybe someday I'll do YouTube or something like that. But right now I'm still very new. So I'm just going to stay on LinkedIn, and I'll post, if I'm going to change or go a different direction, I'll be posting on LinkedIn. So I would say follow me there.
Awesome. So that's Jon with no H Thompson, and a Junior Compliance Analyst.
Jon,
right now.
Yeah, Jon. No H. That's right.
Yep.
No H Thompson.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I feel like I learned a lot, selfishly speaking.
Hey, that's good. As long as someone did. I think I had a great time too. This was fantastic. Thank you.
Awesome. We'll see you.